And I've got joining me this morning Island County Commissioner Jill Johnson. Good morning, Jill.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for taking the time out of your day. I know you guys are really busy with everything that's going on, but taking the time out to answer some questions for us about what is happening, how is Island County responding, and what's going on. So, can you share a little bit with us, and we'll get some questions. Just so you guys know, if you have questions for Commissioner Johnson, go ahead and comment on them. We'll try to get to as many of those as we can.
So, about 2 weeks ago, Island County declared a state of emergency related to COVID-19. And really, what that allowed us to do was stand up our emergency response team and then begin to move funding around so that we could meet the response without going through the entire bureaucracy of what we typically do. Contract approval before expenditures. We can now expend money and get contract approval after the fact. So we've been in that mode for, I think we're starting our third week now, and monitoring the numbers of active cases that are coming in, staying in touch with hospitals and providers to make sure they have the appropriate personal protective equipment that they need, and just doing that general coordinating work behind the scenes to try to make sure that everybody has what they need on the front lines, and then pushing out accurate information so the community really knows where we are at as a local community.
Awesome. Cool. So, like I said, guys, type your comments or your questions in the comments. We'll do our best to get all those answered. Some questions that I've heard already is, you know, there's there are already rumors of more extensions of quarantines. What should we be preparing for?
I would say on Friday, the governor's press conference was an indicator of probably more steps to come. So we're waiting for him to direct some of those more extreme measures. We are anticipating an announcement from the president later today about some of the uh, enforcement recommendations he has. And we anticipate something from the governor later today as well. Without My guess is that he's going to move us towards a shelter in place state. I don't know that for sure, but that's kind of the progression of decision making that we've been seeing. And what that would mean is that we would really drop down to essential services, and then asking people to work from home, and then, really not run unnecessary errands until we can kind of slow the curve of what we're seeing right now. I don't want to say for sure what's going to happen, but just watching that progression of decision making, I think, is pretty much the direction we're headed.
So, would that mean that county services are then limited, or what would that mean as far as the county goes?
So we would go with as many online services as we can deliver. And that's a little concerning for us too. We don't take all of our applications online yet. And so IT has been working diligently to get as many permit applications online, real estate transactions online, all the things that we can do online, so that we can continue services, just not in person. And then the other part of it is, like, right now, where we're at is that you can make appointments to come into those offices. We really want to keep government services going from a economic stabilization standpoint. Obviously, our public health team would have to come to work regardless, right? So the emergency response team, public health, we've got behavioral health, mental health specialists who are available by phone. Those folks will be working to take calls from people who are concerned. So our goal is just keep government services going the best we can, but we would need to do as much as we could remotely. And that would be true for any business. I mean, I would encourage any business to do the same thing. You get your services online as much as possible so that you can continue doing your work, but you're just going to do it from home in a more less exposed location.
Right. Yeah, that's kind of like what we've already done. I mean, we're already asking our staff to work from home, doing as much online as we can. As agents, I mean, we already have the ability, and I think some have already mentioned it. We work with folks coming from out of the area that may have never seen their house when they bought it. So we're already trying to put some of those things in place, and agents have done it before. So it's just a matter of using those tools. A couple questions we got. Amy, thanks for the comment. Keep it up, Island County. I've never been through this before, but I think you're doing an amazing job. Um, how will shelter in place be enforced should that come?
So it really at this stage will be on the honor system. We don't have county staff that's going to go out there and enforce this. And certainly our local law enforcement would encourage good behavior, but they are really not designed to criminalize leaving your home. So there is talk, the president's declaration may utilize National Guards as reinforcements, but I would anticipate that that would happen in big urban areas. So Washington State is in this conversation. We're one of the big three states, New York, Illinois is one, California, Washington. We're the states that they're all watching. I realize that adds up to four, but we're the states that they're watching. But really, if that type of level of reinforcement came in, we're talking about the Seattle, King County, Pierce, Snohomish County areas. In our area, we would just continue to encourage that behavior, but we're not anticipating going into enforcement mode because we're just not designed for that. And really, what we're trying to do is keep people, our staff, focused on public health, not criminalization of leaving your home. Uh, we're
So
counting on. Oh, sorry.
how would that differ from what is in place right now, or what's being asked of people right now?
So right now people are, it's not as strict, right? We haven't said only leave for essential services. We haven't said there's significant restrictions on small business, restaurant owners, nail salons, hair salons, but a lot of other businesses are still able to operate. Shelter in place would really clamp down on that and basically say everybody go home unless you need to be out. And then with fewer businesses open, there's fewer reasons to go out. But again, I don't anticipate that we're going to have a law enforcement criminalization process. I think what we're really going to have is that kind of community peer pressure, which, by the way, is equally effective, to just kind of encourage people to take good steps. We are not at the peak of our curve right now. Uh, Whitby General Hospital was testing all last week. More tests were available, and we haven't gotten the results from all those tests back. So we anticipate we're going to get another potential spike in cases. Every time there's a spike in a case or a known case, we send a team out to investigate who they've had contact with. But more cases mean more people who have been in contact with individuals who have this. So we there should not be this kind of false sense of security that we've reached our peak and because we've done this for a week that we're good. We are still at the beginning of our exposures. And again, not to be alarmist, but just to really accept the reality of personal responsibility in this situation. That the only way to slow the spread is for us to take precautionary measures ourselves.
How would you define essential services, and how can, as a business, we determine what is essential for our business to continue to operate?
Right. So this is the hard question. We went through this last week, even at the county. I mean, you start to say, well, essential defined as law enforcement and keeping the jails open. Obviously, yes. Is essential getting the trash off the islands? Yeah. Is essential making sure there's not trees over the roads? Sure. And is essential making sure people get building permits so that we don't slow down the building industry? We said yes to that, but that is maybe one where we pull back and potentially say no. It's just we're trying to take the economic ramifications of our decisions into an account. For other businesses, you have to go through that same decision making metrics. My guess, and it's a guess, is that the governor's decision, if he makes this type of decision, will come with some instruction to help define that for people. But for businesses, I would say trying to do the things that limit contact with people face to face, but still try to keep your functioning behind the scenes business elements in place. So if you sell insurance, what can you do to communicate with your clients during this situation where it doesn't have face to face contact? I don't think it means stopping the economy. I think what it means is trying to stop face to face connections as much as possible and do business like we're doing right now. I mean, this really is a way to have a conversation with somebody that you normally do business with without coming in. And they're doing medical appointments this way as well, right? So it doesn't mean that everything stops. It just means we start doing it a different way. It also means you're going to spend a lot more time with your spouse.
And try to work with kids around too. That's a challenge.
That's right. That's right. I mean, nobody knows how hard it is to work from home until you have a bunch of kids running around thinking that it's like 24-hour a day daddy time, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. One of the questions, will we be able to still do perk tests and get permits? I think you kind of addressed that a little bit. You guys are looking at different ways that we can still be able to perform those.
Right. And again, we may come up with a system where people drop off their paperwork and we get it and get it delivered to people who are doing the work. We really want to keep that business side of what the county does moving as long as possible and as long as people are healthy. The other thing we're thinking about in terms of essential services is who backs up the essential services, right? So making sure that all of our employees aren't exposed at the exact same time, and that we have backup employees that we can move into public health if we need to back up public health. So making sure you have an organizational bench is also something to really think about when you're evaluating your essential services. If you're a business that has to be open to the public, make sure that you have a bench so that you could put somebody else on the front line if you need to do that. And that's what we're doing as well.
Awesome. Shauna, thank you for your question. The question from Shauna is the county going to make an official announcement discouraging tourism at this time in our state parks?
So the state parks would be a decision from the state. Again, we're waiting for today's announcement to determine our next steps. We think some of these decisions may be made for us. If not, we will look at taking steps in county-owned parks. I mean, I've sent an email already this morning about some parks where we need to put additional signage up to discourage gatherings of people. But then the state parks are controlled by the state. I did send a note out also about Deception Pass. There was a lot of people up there today, parking, lines for the bathroom. Again, our perception is that because we're outside, we're fine, and of course, fresh air is great, but that 6-foot rule still applies, right? And so it's really when you get that kind of saliva-y germ onto somebody else that you get exposure. And what we know is that there's like a 6-foot spit range, I guess. I mean, I'm learning this stuff like everybody else is, but
And
it's
careful
that,
what you touch, right? Be
that's
aware of
right.
what you're touching.
That's exactly right. And you don't realize how many things that you do touch. Like I was feeling pretty proud of myself for wiping off the shopping cart. And then I was thinking about how I put my card in and type in my code and do all of that. And I'm like, well, shoot, I didn't think about any of that, And so making sure you have disinfectant and wash your hands and think about how often you touch your face. I mean, it seems like little things, but those are the little things that control the spread.
Awesome. So you mentioned the county is attempting to contact people that may have been around someone who was infected. How are you going about that, and how can we find out if we might have been in contact with someone who's tested positive?
So we really encourage people to wait to be contacted versus doing the outreach to public health about was I contacted. And when somebody tests positive, then we have a public health individual who meets with them and goes through a list of contacts. Where have you been? Who have you been in close proximity with? And then they begin that outreach that way. That's also how we determine if there are source outbreaks, right? Like cluster outbreaks. So if, for example, people who are presenting with COVID-19 all have a similar experience that they were at same place, same time. That tells us a story about the fact that we need to be more proactive about getting in touch with people who were there at the same time. What we should all assume, because of the way the numbers are presenting in our county, is that we are coming in contact with people who have this just in our normal course of daily activity. So we know that Skagit County had a cluster or maybe two that they've investigated. At this stage, we don't have a cluster that we've identified. I think there are some concerns about some areas that we're looking at, but none of those have been confirmed, and they are areas that wouldn't affect the general public. So we're still focused a lot on nursing homes. We talk directly with school districts. We talk directly with the hospital. We have outreach workers assigned to each of these areas where we think there's high risk exposure to make sure that we're tracking connections to those larger employers and entities. We talk with the Navy all the time. And so we're really trying to make sure that areas where we could have concentrated outbreaks, that we are in daily communication with them. But if you're worried, like I came in contact with someone and I don't know, it's because you haven't shown up in their immediate circle of exposure. And so if you did, you would be contacted.
Awesome. So one of the questions we have is, how much information do you guys get before it gets released to the general public, and how quickly is that information getting out?
So it does depend. I mean, most of the time I've seen us, if it's pretty significant news, we can turn it around in a half an hour or so. But everything we release has to be verified. So that's one of the things I get asked sometimes about what people can do to help. One of the things is to not speculate on social media. If you don't have, we only release things that have been verified. So our numbers are released once they're verified. The State Department of Health has been notified, and the individual with the infection has been notified. We won't tell the public before that person knows. And then we won't hold that information. We release once a day at 3:00. We won't hold information beyond that. Some of the times, like how I'm saying, I'm anticipating an announcement from the governor. We'll get an email that says the governor is planning on having a press conference. We don't always know what's in that, but usually about 20 minutes before the press conference, we'll get some kind of indication so that we can start our process up to respond. But in general, we don't know much more than we would hold information at the most 12 hours for verification that I've seen. But most of the time we turn it around pretty quick. But we do have it a little bit before the public, just to make sure that all the checks are in the boxes before it's released.
That makes sense.
But I don't always get it. They don't tell me stuff they don't want gossiped about. Let me assure you.
If we're not in that at-risk class, healthy mid-30s, and we start showing symptoms, should we try to get tested? Should we stay at home and ride it out, assuming symptoms are mild? What can we be doing? What should we do? What are you guys recommending?
If you have shortness of breath and a fever, you really need to contact your health provider and let them make that determination. And the fever is the highest trigger, right? So what we're hearing is a lot of people presenting with multiple symptoms. They call their doctor. The doctor says, "Do you have a fever?" They say no. The doctor doesn't recommend testing. So what we're hearing is the fever is the trigger. But certainly you should reach out to your primary care physician and let them make that determination for you, because they know your underlying health conditions, obviously, right? And they are now becoming more skilled at knowing what they're looking for in terms of recommending who should be tested. There are limitations on the number of tests, and so they are targeting those like high risk individuals. But again, with the goal of slowing the spread, as more tests become available, what the healthcare industry wants to do is make sure that they're getting people tested so we know how the virus is spreading. Our data shows that younger age group, even 30s and 40s, is being infected. They're just not presenting with the extreme symptoms. And so it's not that we're not carriers, it's that we're not dying at the same rate, but we are spreading at the same rate. And so knowing is helpful information to the understanding how the disease spreads. But your primary care physician will be the decider of whether or not you get your test.
Gotcha. For those of you just joining us, I'm with Island County Commissioner Jill Johnson. She's taken the time to talk with us this morning, answer questions about what's going on, how is Island County responding to the coronavirus and the outbreak. How are they responding? What are we doing? And what can we do as a community? So if you have questions, please type them in the comments. We'll get those answered as much as possible. One of the other questions we have is, if I'm around someone who's at risk on a regular basis, should I get tested? Can I get tested? And is there a point in getting tested without symptoms if I could just get it 5 minutes later?
I mean, I think in that situation, if you're around somebody high risk, you need to really take those social distancing, self-isolation steps and not expose yourself to the community. So in this instance, getting tested without symptoms, I don't think benefits you in any way. What you really have to assume is that the people you're coming in contact with on a daily basis can expose you to this. So again, in Island County, where people are contracting this is through normal social interaction. They're at work, at the grocery store, wherever they've interacted with somebody, that's where they're picking it up. And so you have to assume, if you're with a high risk individual, that you need to be cautious and limit your social contacts. I mean, that's the best advice I can give. The other thing I might say, not to be alarmist, but just in looking at the numbers, because Skagit County just had a spike in their numbers, they are now the fourth most infected county. So King County, Pierce County, Snohomish County, Skagit County, Island County. So we have more active cases in Spokane, more active cases than Yakima, more active cases than Whatcom County. And I don't say that to be alarmist. I'm just saying, like, we aren't immune because we're islanders. We actually are presenting some of the highest known infection rates in the state. And we anticipate that number will again jump because we've been doing the testing last week. Other communities also will jump because they've been doing testing. So I don't want people to panic, but I do think we need to be aware that this kind of island isolation mentality we have, that hasn't proven to be the protection that we maybe hoped it would be, that this virus is in our community and active, and we need to help slow the spread.
You said you've been doing the testing last week. About how long does it take to get those results back?
They're saying about 5 days. Sometimes they can do it a little faster. I know people have contacted me who've been waiting 8 days. It really depends on what lab they sent the they sent the test to, and how overwhelmed that lab is, and how they can turn it around. Then they do the notification, and then they upload to the Department of Health. So there's a little bit of a delay in there, but the individual should hear in about 5 days, is what I'm hearing.
So the numbers that we see updated this week are positive tests from last week.
Correct. Right.
So how will we know at what point, and how will you guys know when we can start letting up on some of the emergency measures, when we've kind of gone over that peak?
So I mean, that is a decision that will be made at the State Department of Health level, and probably in coordination with the Center for Disease Control federally. But they monitor those numbers, and then we'll be able to determine when we're having a decline back to a lower infection rate. We will make our decisions because the states put the most restrictive limitations in place. We'll make our decisions once they lift their decisions. We won't loosen things up before the state loosens things up. Mostly because we want to be consistent in messaging. So you don't want to worry about what county you're going into and what rules there are. We're just going to follow the lead of the state in this instance, because it's easier for people to understand.
So is there any anticipation, thanks Jen for this question, is there any anticipation to keep the social distancing beyond the original 6 weeks, since we haven't hit that peak yet?
I mean, that's hard to say. We know China was about an 8.5-week event. And so I think, and what I don't know, and one of the things I'm watching is, when you slow this curve, do you extend the number of weeks out further? Is it the same number of people who get infected but at a slower rate, or do you actually slow the rate of infection? And I don't know that. I think that what we have are people who like these epidemiologists that's a fancy word for people who follow diseases. They are monitoring this and the known outbreaks and the infection rate, and they'll make a scientific determination on when it's safe. And then people like me, like politicians, just do what we're told from the scientists, because the last thing you want is an elected official thinking they know more than they know, right? I mean, in this instance, they're experts, and then we really rely on them to inform our decisions.
Awesome. Shauna, thank you for the question. What is our quarantine plan for unsheltered individuals, given that our only shelter is night only?
So we have received money from the state, about $380,000, I think, for this population. We have a team of people who have identified some potential shelter locations, and then we would utilize this funding to stabilize that population. what we want to make sure is that we're stabilizing populations that are presenting with the illness so that we can quarantine them appropriately. The goal of the money is not just to create shelters for shelter's sake, but really make sure that the disease is not spreading within that population. And so we've got some designated sites and some designated funding to help with that particular population of homelessness.
Awesome. Marshall, thank you for your question. You'd mentioned that the fever is one of the main symptoms. I've seen that 40% that tested positive do not have a fever. Do you know if that's true or any proof of that?
I don't know if it's true or not true. I just know that what we've been told is that if you present with any of those other symptoms and a fever, that's the trigger to call your doctor. So, because there's a lot of people with allergies and chest congestions, they want to make sure that there's an other underlying condition that really is entering you into the system of testing. We don't have unlimited tests right now, and so really trying to identify those high risk factors. There's a lot of stuff that people are reading. I'm not skilled enough to validate whether those things are true or not true. I just get the direction from our public health department and the state Department of Health, and then I repeat it with authority.
That sounds great. Susie, thank you for your question. How do they decide how many test kits are given to counties, especially when it's showing counties not previously no cases or ticking up with positive results? How do they determine what counties to assign those kits to?
So there, right now, all those resources are being coordinated through the State Department of Health. We're working with federal level agencies. Our emergency management then reaches out to them and tries to get, lets them know the level that we have and then asks for more as we're seeing demand. Obviously, the big concerns are the top 3 counties: King, Pierce, Snohomish. They're trying to get as many resources they can there, but we're very active in reminding them that smaller counties actually have limited resources. And so you need to make sure that we get resources here as well. It's a little bit of a negotiation that goes on that emergency management level between local and the state. And then there's no clear formula. I mean, you just kind of get in line and try to grab what you can grab in a respectful way. This is new for them too. I mean, some of these processes and procedures, we really have done a lot of emergency management work statewide for incidents, right? Earthquakes or a tsunami or even a volcano. We've had those, right? So we know how to plan for mudslides. We know how to plan for that. These singular events. There's been less planning around a long-term event like a viral outbreak or a pandemic like we're having right now. And so a lot of these agencies are also trying to learn and ask questions, just as the county is. The good thing that I've seen is that everybody's been working in partnership because they want to get the resources on the ground.
I've heard that the National Guard is coming to the state. What does that mean for Island County?
So we have not had a declaration from the president that that's the case. And so what you first hear is a declaration from the president, then the governor would then respond to that declaration, and then they would determine the locations that National Guard might be present. Again, my assumption, and this is just a guess, is if that starts to play out, you're going to see those resources put into higher concentration population areas, right? So probably like San Francisco, LA, Chicago, New York, Seattle. Those are the areas that would need extra reinforcement versus more rural areas like ours. But I've never seen this play out before. So I'm not sure. I don't want to give false assurances. I do know that the president needs to declare that first, and then upon declaration, we'll know more.
Cool. Thank you for teaching us how the government works and the steps we have to take, because we just hear it and think it's just going to happen. We don't see all the behind the scenes, so we really appreciate that. How is this affecting Island Transit and its passengers? Is there any limited service there? What's going on with Island Transit?
So Island Transit did go to their emergency routes, which basically means their mainline routes, some routes through the city of Oak Harbor. They're not doing all their branch routes, primarily because they need to have backup drivers. So they can't have all their drivers on all routes all the time. And then also, they want to make sure that they have the paratransit in place, which is an important transportation tool for our most vulnerable. I would say in terms of Island Transit, there's a lot of people who depend on that. But I would encourage people to, if one of your neighbors is somebody who's dependent upon paratransit or island transit, try to get to know them and see if you can maybe run errands for them rather than them run the errands themselves. I mean, this is the best opportunity I've seen to get to know your neighbors. Try to make sure that if you're a healthy individual, that you are the resource for them and we're not putting them out there. Again, it doesn't mean that you can't get the virus. It means your chances to fight that virus are much higher, right? So what you want to do is get somebody who is not able to fight that virus as protected as possible. And putting them on paratransit, although it's a great service, still puts them out in the community. But Island Transit's doing its emergency routes right now, and they have not canceled full service.
Cool. So that kind of goes to what can we do as a community other than stay home and not panic? What can we do to help?
So, I mean, I think if everyone made friends with one person who's a little more vulnerable than them and supported them, that would be helpful, right? So, like, I have family members that are high risk. We make sure that we get some of the groceries and drop them off for them on the doorstep. I don't go in right now, which is really hard on me because I like to get my kisses, but I just have to wait. That also for those of us with steady paychecks. So we're fortunate that in a community that's got a lot of government paychecks, military paychecks, school district paychecks, hospital paychecks, county, city paychecks, right? A lot of government paychecks that are still being delivered. It's easier for us to step back and say, okay, if we have something, can I buy a little extra and get it to the food bank? Do I have a friend that I can reach out to and say, hey, can I get you some groceries this month? I mean, it really, for those of us who are not in that kind of hourly employee business or who have their own business, we have a lot of small business owners. Those folks have always been really generous to our community. And those of us with stable paychecks need to think about ways to be generous back. Then the other thing I think people can really do is on social media, really try hard not to spread rumors or share opinions. I mean, I certainly have my opinions about things, and I've learned the hard way that not everybody wants them. And so in this situation, like, yes, you may have fears. Yes, you may think something is an unnecessary precaution. But the more that we can just share validated sources, so public health sources, State Department of Health, the CDC sources, those sources of information help. And uh, unvalidated sources of information don't help because a lot of people are really afraid. So speculating about the number of cases, saying somebody who's infected, that type of information actually is not helpful on social media. And I would just encourage people to show restraint. If you want to freak out behind the scenes to your friends, have at it. But I would just encourage people to not try to politicize this or make it about something it's not. This is a viral pandemic. We're trying to slow the spread of it. We need good information out there, and then we all just need to take personal responsibility. And then care for somebody else that you come in contact with a little bit more than you normally would. We got this. I mean, this is what we're good at, right?
We can do it. We can come together as a community. We're
That's
Whidbey
right.
Island strong, Island County strong, state
That's
strong.
right.
We can do this.
That's
For
right.
those of you just joining us, if you're just joining us, we have Island County Commissioner Jill Johnson with us. She's been so generous with her time to take some time to answer questions of how Island County is responding to the coronavirus. If you have questions for her, we've got a few more minutes with her. Go ahead and type them in the comments. We'll try to get those answered as best we can before we head out. So obviously, this is uncharted territory for everybody. Everyone is handling it different. How are you and your team doing?
So my team's doing great. They are very much in response mode. So I think I've posted pictures of what our emergency operations center looks like. We've got people in there, phone lines in there. They're monitoring emails as they come in. We're taking phone calls from the public. And so my team is really solid. And I am 50-50. The part of me that is an elected official with access to information is very calm in the fact that our system knows what they're doing. We're making decisions based on information. We're pushing out accurate information. We're responding in a timely fashion, and we're doing our very best to slow the spread. That part of me is calm and confident that we are on it. The part of me that has a little more anxiety is I've actually never seen this kind of economic hit before, where you see the government just stand on the brakes of small business owners and people who make hourly wages. And I'm watching these kind of economic development packages try to come through, or and it's unclear to me how they're going to make it to people. I'm nervous for I'm nervous for these business owners. I have that chamber background, so I know a lot of these people personally, and I see how much they give to the community. I know how hard they fight for their business, and then to just be told to shut your doors, what does that mean, right? And so I think if I have anxiety, it's just around this economic piece of um, the economy never works particularly well when the government gets too involved in it. And so, how do you put the brakes on and then start it back up in a way that's fair and equitable and doesn't artificially hurt some folks? I'd say that's where my highest anxiety is. I want to be reassuring around it, but I don't have enough information to be particularly reassuring. I want to be reassuring to folks to understand that I'm aware of the fact that they have a lot of anxiety. Like, that anxiety is real, and I think we should all be super sensitive to it. I mean, if you don't know how to make your mortgage payment, that's not a joke, right? That's your family. And I think we need to be sensitive to what this means. And I also think that comes out to, some of the things where people are congregating outside, acting like it's kind of a joke. There's that public health component of it. And then there's also that mental health component of it too, right? You're sending a message to a lot of people who are sacrificing a lot that you don't care. And I don't think that's true. I think people do, do care. I just think we haven't necessarily connected all the dots to those folks who are really sacrificing right now. And our business community is really sacrificing right now.
Yeah, absolutely. It's hard on a lot. We're fortunate in our business that we can still help people and do it virtually, but not every business has that luxury. I mean, I can't imagine being a restaurant owner right now. They're definitely getting creative though. That's one thing I have personally loved seeing through all this is the creativity, the coming together community. I the only thing that I can relate back to about it is like September 11th when we had the whole country come together. But it's so much different. I mean, it doesn't even compare. But to see community come together and these businesses finding creative ways to still service the community and the community still supporting them, it makes me happy. But I agree, and we have others commenting that we all agree it's really around the economic pieces where a lot of anxiety comes in. We have another question. What do you anticipate tourist season to be like this year?
Well, right now, we've seen a sharp decline in the last few weeks. Even we're going to watch the tourist economy when things come back online and people are allowed to travel. We've got money held back at the county that we're talking about releasing when it's safe for people to come and visit, and then try to really push out there and help these businesses make up some lost ground. But as everybody who lives here know, during peak tourist season, we're already at capacity. So it's really going to be trying to get that message to go further into fall and into early winter next year to try to get folks to visit here. My hope is that everybody will be so stir crazy after this is all over that they'll want to visit. But again, we got to open those gates up responsibly and not reignite this kind of viral spread. So I think tourism is an area we're definitely watching. We already know that there's an impact. We have some advantages because of our parks and different things, but also we don't want to overburden them and create another unsafe situation. So, but I think the good news is we've held money back in anticipation of that. Also, tomorrow at our Tuesday meeting, we're looking at suspending some fees. So, like, we're still doing inspections of restaurants. If they're out there serving food, we got to make sure they're doing it safely. That we actually charge the business for that service. Right now, the county is tomorrow considering suspending all of those fees associated with these types of services we deliver, because we don't want to put an additional burden on any of our local businesses that are struggling right now. And we'll look at all of our different fees throughout this process to determine where we can offer a little bit of relief.
Awesome. Another question we have, I'm going to test something out here real quick. What about all the mortgage, rent, and payment rumors? What's true right now? What's not? There's rumors that they're being deferred. What do you know about all of that?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'd like to know, but none of these programs go through the county, so we're not the overseers of them. I watch the news just like everybody else and is trying to make sense of what is true and what isn't true. I mean, if I were to share my personal opinion, which of course you know I'll do, a lot of these big banks got pretty big bailouts during the economic crisis around 2006, 2008. And I think that it's incumbent upon them to give back right now. So if they're in a position to defer mortgage payments, lower interest rates, I mean, I would hope that they are either going to be instructed or would willingly do that, because this country has stepped up to stabilize banks before, and there's an opportunity for banks to do things in reverse. But that's a personal opinion on my part. I am just watching the news like everybody else, trying to make sense of these economic packages that are coming out of the federal level and how they'll play out at the local level. And of course, that's one of all of our big concerns, is that you got to get the decision made at the federal level. If they've got to move those policies down to the state level for implementation at the local level. I mean, there is layers of bureaucracy in there, and what we really need to do is just get the solution on the ground as quick as possible. And I think all of local government has been advocating up to the state about just, clearing the pipelines, making sure that we don't have unnecessary requirements on any of this. My assumption is that the state government is doing the same to the federal government. But I'm in the same, I don't know what's going to happen camp as everybody else on the economic issues. Sorry.
All right. Well, we didn't answer the one question. No, we understand that. What else do you want us to know? What should we as a community be doing? What do you want us to know? What message do you have for the community before we wrap up?
I mean, it really comes down to take it seriously, and then look for opportunities to serve others. And I think if we do those two things, that we're going to be in a good spot. I think there's not, those same 5 non-pharmaceutical interventions we talk about: wash your hands, cough in your arms, 6 feet back, stay home if you're sick, wipe down surfaces. They feel really routine. But that's really the first line of protection from the spread. And then now, as we move into more limiting of groups and potentially, sheltering in place, if that's the decision the governor makes, I mean, really to heed those directions. And then also think about the people who are not able to care for themselves under those instructions, and find a way that you can maybe be helpful. I just feel like we've got this. I mean, the one thing about being an island is, although it didn't limit the spread of the disease, it does allow us to function as a community a lot better. And so I'm just super, like you, I'm just super inspired by the stories I'm seeing and the care other people are showing. I find it pretty amazing, the hearts that we have in this county.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you for taking the time to be with us this morning. Like you just mentioned, community is huge. Each of us doing our part. Community is, it's one of the main things we care about. Thinking about home, it's not just about the house you live in, but the community that we live in too. And while we might be separate islands across the water from each other, we are still one county and one community. And we have people that work back and forth. And so that's really we both have said it already, really how the community is coming together, being a part of that community. And it makes me proud to live here.
Me
So
too.
thank you for all that you guys are doing, all that your team is doing. I know you guys have way more than you ever anticipated to be dealing with and thinking about. So we appreciate you taking the time out this morning to be with us.
Well, thank you for having me, and this was a great service to the community. Hopefully we got some good information out there, and I really want to say thank you to the Coldwell Banker team for all the hard work you're doing. I mean, it makes a difference, so thank you too.
Absolutely. And thank you all for your questions this morning. Without your questions, we wouldn't have had much to talk about. And we wouldn't have been able to answer what really matters to you. And that's what we really were hoping to do this morning. So thank you all for joining us. Commissioner Johnson, thank you again for taking the time. And guys, do your part. Be a part of the community. Remember, we're a family. We are a community. We're a family. Do your part, and we can all get through this together. Thank you, Commissioner Johnson. Thank you, guys. Have a great day.
Thanks.
Where's the best place to go for updates? Island County's website?
Island County Public Health.
Island
then-
County.
And
We'll
then
put it. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. I'm sorry.
Go for it.
Rick Larson has a telephone call tonight at 6 p.m. If you want to call in, it's at 1-855-962-0954, and that will give you more insight on the federal level.
Can you give us that number one more time?
You bet. It's 1-855-962-0954.
All right, perfect. We'll get that number along with the Island County Public Health link in the comments of this video. Remember, you guys, this is going to be on our page. If you know someone that wasn't able to watch it, share it, get the information out to the community. It'll also be available on YouTube later. So get it out there, get it out to the community. We really want to make sure that this information gets spread to everybody. We get to hear it from the source, not all of the different places that we might get that information. So Commissioner Johnson, thank you again for joining us. Thank you all. You guys have a great rest of your day and stay safe and healthy.
Thank you, Camden.